Welcome back to another episode of In the Box. This is episode 6. We took last week off. There were some scheduling conflicts on top of the fact that there really just wasn't that much to talk about in the NHL world. But Matt, how are we doing? We're back. We're back in business.
I'm excited. There's a lot of hating on our schedule this week. I'm so hyped to be a hater.
Yeah, we got some controversial topics, some controversial players. We'll be talking about the Reaves hit on Nurse, Pittsburgh tearing it down, McDavid hitting 1,000 points, what his GOAT status potentially could be, Jiricek and Zegras, what their situations are, and then we're finishing it off with the Kaprizov. Would you rather? Because he's playing so good. Let's see how high we are on him. But yeah, we're gonna start with the Ryan Reaves hit on Darnell Nurse. Ryan Reaves hit on Darnell Nurse. Nurse was coming around the net, got laid out. What's your initial thoughts on that pretty dirty hit?
I mean, my initial thought is it's really dirty. My thought is Ryan Reaves does this. We know that this is functionally, that's the only reason Ryan Reaves is on a team anymore, is to hit guys in the head. You hate to see it. I mean, those pictures of Darnell Nurse afterwards,
scary. Yeah,
it looked brutal. I mean, it's gross, it's gory. There's really no place in the game for it. Frankly, I think he should have got suspended even longer given his history. You know, this is not Ryan Reaves' first rodeo, not by a long shot.
Fifth suspension, I think I read. His longest before that was 3 games. So not his first time.
I think that's kind of universal. Like, the NHL has probably a dozen of these constant repeat offenders that probably should get suspended more than they do. But 5 games seems to be the absolute max George Parros and them are willing to go.
Yeah. I think talking about the actual hit, I understand the complaint that Darnell Nurse was looking down. He put himself in kind of a vulnerable position, but you see the slow-mo. You see Ryan Reaves go up and kind of target the head. It's not like he was aiming directly for the body and kept it extremely low. It was clearly such a dirty hit in the fact that it is a guy like Ryan Reaves that has garnered the reputation of kind of being a goon, has been suspended multiple times. Yeah, I think he kind of got lucky with 5 games, if I'm gonna be honest. Because Tanner Jeannot only got 3 for something similar, but although Tanner Jeannot also is kind of a little bit goonish, he doesn't have the same reputation as Ryan Reaves. And again, as devastating as that hit looked, thankfully Darnell Nurse is only gonna miss 5 to 10 games. But I'm not going to kill player department of safety here. I think at most it should have been 8. I don't know if I'd go 10, 12. 5 seems fair. When they said that it was only a phone call, which means that it can only be 5 games max, I was expecting it to be 2 or 3 and Leaf Nation to absolutely explode. It's honestly not a loss for Toronto. He sucks. That's the other thing. But yeah, I'm really happy I'm just happy that Darnell Nurse is only out 5 to 10 days because that's a CTE inducing. First off, I'm surprised his neck, something didn't snap there in terms of a muscle or something. But yeah, he almost got lucky, as horrible as that is to say that he got took out like that. But 5 to 10 games is definitely not the worst case scenario for a hit like that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree and co-sign that I'm sure a lot of Leafs fans wish he got a 20-game suspension. That way they're not allowed to put him in the lineup. Ryan Reaves being a healthy scratch is the best possible lineup for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Don't get it twisted on that. But yeah, I mean, as far as, I'm happy Nurse is going to be okay long-term. As far as is his head so far down that you can kind of justify it? I think at a certain point you have to say it's 2024. We need to protect the players, right? We can't talk about is his head maybe angled down enough that it's kind of justifiable? No, it's the contact was straight to the head. It's obviously to the head, and there's really no place for those kind of hits to the head, especially when you have Darnell Nurse, an actual good player, and Ryan Reaves, who, at this point in his career, he doesn't do anything except run around and hit guys.
Yeah, and you even watch after it happened, Ryan Reaves just skating off, acting like nothing happened. He knew what he was doing. He was going for, maybe he wasn't directly headhunting, but he knew that in that circumstance, he was going to make some massive hit. So although the onus is a little bit on Darnell Nurse to have his head up, know that Ryan Reaves and other goons are potentially on the ice, it's just unacceptable. And it hopefully they probably should have gone longer just because it is a guy like Ryan Reaves that's not a massive impact guy, and you could have really sent a message. I don't hate 5 games again, but yeah, I've never been a fan of Ryan Reaves. I'm not a big goon enforcer fan outside of Matt Martin, but even him, his final years was pitiful to watch. He was just a liability out there. It's just something in 2024. Ryan Reaves was a perfect player for the late 90s, early 2000s. In 2024, he's just a horrible guy that is not a horrible guy in terms of a horrible player, not him personally. But yeah, he's a liability out there, and guys like him are dinosaurs in the game nowadays.
Yeah, and just even Vegas Ryan Reaves was okay enough to kind of keep up with the game. There has not been a single moment where Ryan Reaves was in a Leafs sweater where I thought this guy is an NHL player. He's just not at this point in his life.
Yeah, and he's still, what's his contract? Like 1.2, 1 point. He doesn't make the league minimum, so like I guess they feel forced that they have to put him in the lineup.
100% vary it. You can vary most of it, but not the whole contract.
Yeah, so it's he'll stay on the Leafs and continue to shit the bed in terms of an actual player outside of maybe fighting some guys and laying some big hits. But yeah, I'm very anti Ryan Reaves, and I think you share that sentiment even more in that regard. Moving on, the Pittsburgh Penguins. We've talked about them before. It's a brutal start for them, 7-10-3, including a 6-goal first period against the Dallas Stars that I watched. It was amazing. But yeah, according to Taylor Hayes from some Pittsburgh journal, some Pittsburgh beat reporter, she said that everybody is available outside of Sidney Crosby potentially for trade, but it's not like a blow up. They're trying to probably just get younger potentially, but like stay somewhat competitive. My thoughts on this are there's not a ton of people to move on the Pittsburgh Penguins right now. Like, it seems good in theory that you could potentially move off some guys, but outside of Pedersen, there's no expiring guys with actually any value, or Malkin has 2 years left. I'll throw it over to you first. How realistic is a Pittsburgh Penguins teardown nowadays, given the contracts they gave out recently?
Really not great. I will say, and you've mentioned on your page a couple times how Marcus Pedersen is good. He is sneaky underrated. I think that's the kind of guy where you retain half at the deadline. You can get a first-round pick for Marcus Pedersen.
Probably a decent prospect.
Worse defensemen than Marcus Pedersen have got first-round picks at trade deadlines lately. The entire rest of their roster sheet, I don't know who fits the combination of someone on a tradable contract and someone that guys want.
We come prepared.
We do.
We got for those listening on audio, we got like the cap wages printed out of this shit to go through.
I mean, maybe someone wants Michael Bunting. Does Kyle Dubas even want to trade Michael Bunting? He seems
that's his
very
boy.
attached to Bunting.
I feel like that's trading Michael Bunting would admit like I've fucked up pretty bad. You know what I'm saying? Like he brought in Michael Bunting. That was so obviously like he loves this guy after trading for him in the Jake Gensel deal. That would be an admission of complete guilt at that point in terms of his tenure.
And I just, not so much about the trading, but I do want to emphasize the point that I think the biggest issue for the Penguins, other than the goalies, obviously, has been Chris Letang really just not playing well. And he's had a great career. I'm probably leaning towards Letang as a Hall of Famer. But he's 37 and a half years old. Unfortunately, he did have that stroke pretty recently, like major significant issues.
Hasn't been
frankly, it's a miracle that he came back to play at all after that. But like the Penguins purposely built their roster to have like 5 great players and then a bunch of like filler guys.
Veterans.
So if one of those great players is not actually playing great, they have major problems. And Crosby has been great this year. Malkin's been very good. Erik Karlsson has been, I think, as good as you could have hoped for. Anyone truly expecting that like, Norris winning Erik Karlsson was out of their mind. He's been fine enough. I'm focusing in on Letang as being like the weak point out of guys you would have hoped would have been a strong point.
Yeah, definitely. He's 37 right now. He has I thought only had 2 years left at 6.1. He has 3 years left at 6.1. I don't think he's been a $6.1 million defenseman right now. So I think he's safe just because that's such a bad contract. When looking at some of these other guys, I'd say maybe you could retain $1 million on Brian Rust and get something from him. $5.125 million. Like, he's still decent. He's on IR right now, according to this, but he's still a pretty solid player. He's 32 years old and there's 3 years left at 5.125. But if you retain that, some like older contending team might just say, screw it. If we can get him for like a second or third round pick, and if you can provide value for 2 to 3 years, Raquel is playing better this season. 3 years left at $5 million. Probably can't move that without retaining some. Kevin Hayes, you're not moving. Noel Acciari at $2 million for 1 more year. You're not moving. Yeah, I think Pedersen, you could either get a first round pick or you could get like a decent 24, 25-year-old that maybe just moves your timeline back a little, like keeps you competitive for a couple seasons. You get a 24, 25-year-old and like a second round pick is what Dubas might end up doing. But yeah, they maybe could tear it down, but they're just not those pieces to tear it down compared to other teams that we've seen recently tear it down, like a Calgary Flames. They were kind of in a perfect situation because all of their players, for the most part, were coming up on unrestricted free agency. So they were able to deal Hanifin, Tanev, Lindholm, Markstrom last offseason, and they were able to kind of have this clear exit point. There's not really a clear exit point. The clear exit point was probably like the 2022 season when Letang and Malkin were expiring. You maybe could have done it there, I think, when they, or maybe it was 2023. But instead, they decided to give those guys massive term and then trade for Erik Karlsson. And now they're just going to have to sit in it probably for 2 to 3 years until Crosby just says, I'm either leaving, which I don't think that he will, or I'm retiring. So that's kind of where I stand on Pittsburgh. Where do you think they finish this year in the standings? Do you think they finish genuinely like bottom 10? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see any way they're going to turn it around. I think if anything, not that they're overperforming their talent level right now because that seems absurd to say. But Carlson and Malkin are both injury prone players. Basically everyone on this team who's any useful is over 30. Half the core is over like 35 or 36 at this point. Like I expect them to play even worse down the stretch, honestly. I
yeah,
think
once they're like
January,
eliminated,
February will be even rougher than October and November have been.
I think that they could crawl to like 82, 85 points. Right now, I think they're on pace. They're 7, 10, and 3. That's probably what on pace for like 70. It's pretty goddamn horrendous, goddamn. But I think they could be like an 85-point team. It depends how much they sell at the deadline, given what they have to sell. But yeah, I think the goaltending can only get better from here. They are getting slightly unlucky relative to their expected goals, but I don't expect them to massively improve on that mark. They're just like an average team. They're definitely not Sharks, Hawks, Blue Jackets, Ducks level bad, but yeah, they're just the perfect mix of bad. And it's not like they have like this prospect. Not like Rucker McGrody's going to get called up midseason and completely turn it around or really anything. They're genuinely in the worst spot without a doubt in the NHL for the next 3 years.
They should call up McGrody though. I mean, you have
There's no
nothing to
point,
lose
yeah.
at this point by just throwing him on Crosby's wing and seeing like if we
You
set
should
him
know.
right out the gate with one of the best centers in the league history, whether that's Crosby or Malkin, I think that could only help his development to have that level of talent feeding him. And there's really no reason not to do that. Like having Anthony Beauvillier in your top 6 is
That's not Oilers legend.
That's not
Respect
doing
it.
anything
Respect.
for your future.
Kevin Hayes. Yeah. For I definitely agree with that. Compared to dominating Wilkes-Barre, usually I am in favor of like teams just letting a guy sit in the AHL instead of playing bottom 6, but for this Pittsburgh Penguins
Just
team,
throw him in
literally,
the top
literally, who
6.
gives a
You can.
literally who gives a shit. But moving on, going from Sidney Crosby to the new generation's best player, Connor McDavid reached 1,000 career points. He has 342 goals, 661 assists, 1,003 points thus far in his career. Is this guy like a lock to become the second greatest player of all time? What do you think?
A lock? Absolutely not.
What would you put the odds at?
I think there's a reasonably good chance he'll end up as the consensus second best ever. I mean, I'm not even totally sold there is a consensus, right? Because you talk about the second best ever, and some people will say, well, Mario Lemieux, clearly the second most talented after Gretzky. Other people will say things like Lemieux's career was pretty relatively short.
He only
like
won 3
Gordie
Arts.
Howe had the longevity and the numbers. He should be up there, or put Bobby Orr up there. Or I think the new analytics generation is going to push for Nicholas Lidstrom being as high as number 2.
Or even Crosby when he's all said and done.
Yeah,
with the winning.
I think for whether it's fair or not, a lot of it is going to come down to the playoff success. And I mean, it's after last year. I don't know how you can hold
say
that
that
against
he's say that he's a
McDavid,
choke artist. Yeah.
right?
No.
I was skeptical of him for the first while of his career, as he's not a 200 foot player. I'm not sure he can be a playoff number 1 center.
Yeah, the 2021 series was concerning when he lost to the Winnipeg Jets, got swept. Like he hadn't really had that dominant playoff run. He'd only been in the playoffs twice. There was some serious concerns, but yeah, continue on.
Yeah, and even like 2 years ago, he has like a phenomenal first 2 rounds, and then they get their teeth kicked in a sweep to Colorado, and it's like, okay, McDavid puts up points. Is he a winning player? And then last year in the playoffs, he was so beyond insane that it completely destroys that argument against him. So, I mean, McDavid's great. He's not been surrounded by the greatest talent in the world compared to some of the other guys. I mean, like, the Oilers have other good players, but if your
There's clear
comparison is,
weaknesses.
Lemieux played so long with Jaromir Jagr.
Yeah, Tom Barisow and Barisaw and net. He had Paul Coffey, and I forget the other Hall of Fame defenseman that he had. They in the non-salary cap era, the legends were surrounded well. But yeah, for me, McDavid, I think barring injury, I do agree that he probably needs one Stanley Cup, as like boomerish as that is to say, like, oh, if he doesn't want a Stanley Cup, but he has 2,200 career points and 6 Hearts, he'll never be the GOAT or the second greatest of all time. But yeah, I think he kind of does. I think you need to get at least one as the best player or second best player on a team. As stupid as that is, hockey is a team game, but I do understand the old heads potentially not having him second. I think once he gets that, again, it's basically going to be a lock, because I think even though he might not win the Hart this season, he might not win the Art Ross this season, I think we can kind of pencil him in for like 2 more Harts and 3 more Art Rosses, which would bring him to 5 and 8 all time Hart and Art Rosses. That's by far the second greatest trophy case of all time. I believe Lemieux only has 3 Harts and 6 Art Rosses. So again, once he gets that Stanley Cup, it's basically game over. And I still think, I know you don't think that he can probably touch Gretzky, but I think relative to era dominance, although again, you're probably going to go into Gretzky's awards, what he did in his prime, I think that there could be a debate down the line if McDavid finishes with 2 to 3 Stanley Cups and has 7 Art Harts and 10 Art Rosses, that there is a potential debate. What's your thoughts on a potential Gretzky versus McDavid debate?
I want to bring up a stat that I pulled last night. So McDavid's played 9 seasons. As you just said, he's won 3 Hart trophies. That's really impressive. That's one of the greatest first halves of a careers ever. Wayne Gretzky, in his 9th NHL season, just wrapped up finishing his 8th consecutive Hart Trophy win.
It's decent.
I don't think anybody in any sport will ever win 8 consecutive MVPs again. That's how far ahead of his peers Gretzky was. You can talk about most skilled and how that can get messy, comparing things between eras. But as far as who dominated the guys they played the most, I don't think it's even possible to touch Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, that's fair. He shut out Mike Bossy from any like Hart, from ever winning a Hart. He stopped Mario Lemieux from probably winning. He probably had 2 to 3 clear Hart winning seasons, but Gretzky was still in his prime. So yeah, I think I am definitely McDavid. Like, there's probably only a 5 to 10% chance of him catching Gretzky. He'd have to play until he's 42 years old, win 7 to 8 Harts, 10 to 11 Art Rosses, and finish. I still don't think it's even possible for him to do the point record. But if the adjusted point record is potentially possible, if he finishes with like 2,300, 2,400, played in a lower scoring era, I think it's possible, but it's definitely unlikely. I'd say 80% chance he finishes at the second greatest player of all time. 5 to 10% chance that he becomes the all-time GOAT. But now we're going to talk about some young, disgruntled players. Moving on. Up first, we have David Jiricek. David Jiricek is in the news yet again, and he's had a pretty weird career considering the fact that right out of the gate after getting drafted, he was great in the AHL at 38 points in 55 games with the Cleveland Monsters. Then last year, plays 43 games in the NHL, but only 29 in the AHL. There was some tension between the two parties throughout the season about him getting sent up, sent down repeatedly. Now to start this season, he's only played 5 games, got healthy, scratched a couple times. They also waiver claimed to Dante Fabro, a 26-year-old right-handed defenseman who has been pretty decent for them early on, but obviously taking opportunities away from David Jiricek, to the point where now Don Waddell told the Columbus broadcast that he's trying to sort out the David Jiricek situation in the next couple days. I guess I'll go first on this because I've always been like a very pro David Jiricek guy. I don't think Columbus should fumble this like this. I still think that he is a very special offensive talent. There's definitely concerns about some of his decision-making, and his skating really hasn't progressed that much. But I think if you're Columbus, speaking about like a Recker McGrody, it's not like their defense core has like core pieces in it right now. It's Werenski, Provorov, Severson, Harris, Jack Johnson, and Eric Goodbranson. Find the kid minutes. Like, he's still only 20 or 21 years old. I think he just turned 21, or he's 20 years old. He's still so young, and at 6'4" with the potential that he has, I don't know how you can give up on him unless you get an absolute haulback, unless they get like a decent first round pick for him. Maybe you cut him loose. But I think Columbus needs to give this guy some run, even if maybe he hasn't completely earned it. He's still just so young and so talented that I think that he's worth it.
full agree. I mean, to me, it's really simple. Just play the kid, right? I mean, is Columbus going to be competitive this year? Absolutely not. There's zero chance at all. Hopefully, if you're a Jackets fan, they'll be pretty competitive maybe 3 or 4 years from now. 3 or 4 years from now, Damon Severson and Eric Goodbranson are not going to be doing anything for this team.
Severson has like 6 more years after this. It's 6.25.
I mean,
he'll be doing something, but it won't be good. It will not be good.
We can spend a lot of time, frankly, talking about how Columbus has this just awful roster where they have continued to give out long-term contracts to vets. It doesn't really make sense to me. At a certain point, you got to just play the kids, right?
In fairness, a lot of that was Kakalainen, who's gone now.
Yeah, it's the old GM mostly. But like a team as bad as the Jackets should be at least very young, the way that like the Sharks and the Ducks right now are very young.
Yeah, they never.
This is one of the oldest blue lines in the league I'm looking at here.
Yeah, they never like fully tore it down. They were in a weird spot where Werenski was still decent. They had Boone Jenner. They had some other pieces, so they never Merzlikins as well. So like even though they've been rebuilding the last 3 years, they still have some pretty good players that are in their prime. So they're still in this weird spot. And yeah, with the defense core, Kakalainen really messed up by trading for Severson, really messed up by going out and trading for Provorov, even though Provorov has 1 year left. And yeah, I didn't realize it in the moment, the Fabro waiver claim, bringing in a 26-year-old right-handed defenseman when you apparently have your future number 1 top pair right-handed defenseman in Jiricek. I definitely understand where Jiricek's coming from, that you're picking up guys that aren't that old, that are like 26 years old, might be a long-term piece to kind of replace him. Yeah, it's just a really tough decision. I think they got to figure out something relatively soon, because I don't blame Jiricek for not wanting to go back to the AHL, because he's spent 2 years there. He's been very productive in the AHL. He's clearly at least ready for an elevated chance in the NHL, a full season of 82 games. But it's unfortunate what's happening.
Yeah, I guess my perspective is if you've spent 2 full seasons in the AHL and management still believes he hasn't grown enough defensively, he's not playing well enough defensively, there's deeper issues to look at then there, right? Either the AHL coaching staff is not developing him, and that's a coaching staff thing, or maybe management is figuring this player is not coachable, in which case I guess you should be trading him. But even then, like, trade him now while he has value instead of letting him rot in the AHL for another season where he won't have nearly as much trade value.
Yeah, definitely. I'm thinking, like, if I was a team, a rebuilding team, do the San Jose Sharks, I think they have like another first-round pick in this year's draft. I try to get David Jiricek within my system, especially if you're San Jose, who have a lefty like Sam Dickinson in the system, to bring in a guy like Jiricek. If I was most teams that aren't going to be sniffing the playoffs right now, I'd rather have Jiricek than like the 13th overall pick in this year's draft, considering the fact that he has already proved that he can play at least at the AHL level. It's going to be interesting because, yeah, midseason trades like this usually don't happen, but if he is that unhappy for the past 12 to 14 months, something's definitely got to give relatively soon.
And I want to be clearly pro player here. I think it's fair for him to be unhappy with how he's been treated. I think given his draft slot, given the position Columbus is in, it doesn't really make sense to me how he keeps ending up in the AHL or healthy scratch.
Yeah, far worse players have been given like a full 82 games to see how they are. And especially in better situations than the Columbus Blue Jackets. Yeah, defense core right now.
Just spit out one name. Like the LA Kings have a pretty deep defense. They gave Tobias Bjornfoot a 2-year run. That was a guy who was drafted lower, who did not play very well at the NHL level, but his team still gave him a chance to prove something, to see what you have with it.
Yeah.
And Columbus is just not doing that for reasons that I don't really understand.
Yeah, I guess I don't blame Don Waddell because like he didn't draft the kid, so he doesn't really have that much loyalty. Maybe he just has a different view of Jiricek, doesn't view him that high. Coming from Carolina, a more defensive team, he definitely prioritizes defense, maybe more than some general managers. But yeah, it's just a really sticky situation, and a team might be getting a potential top pair 50-point guy if they play their cards right and trade for him. But we're going to move on to a guy that has been given opportunities early on in his career, started off very good at his career, but has kind of shat the bed recently. I'm talking about Trevor Zegras, the cover boy himself. Yeah, he had 65 points 2 years ago. Then he had 15 and 31 last year, but he was dealing with injuries early on, finished with 10 points in his final 13 games. So you thought he was getting back on track. This season, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points for 4 points in 16 games. He's playing 17.03 a night. What's your thoughts on Trevor Zegras? Is it time to finally just give up on him?
I have a ton of thoughts here. I guess the first thing to say outright to all the Anaheim Ducks fans out there, I don't watch a whole lot of Ducks games. I'm out on the East Coast. They're not very good. So I'm not going to pretend to have an in-depth explanation for why he's struggling. All I can tell you is that it's clearly true that he is. The analytics back up that he's actually gotten noticeably worse than he was 3 or 4 years ago. His XG numbers are the worst since his mid-season call-up rookie year. The one answer that maybe would have made sense to me is, well, the Ducks have one really good wing. It's Troy Terry, and Leo Carlsson plays more with Troy Terry. So I pulled the numbers, Zegras, Troy Terry, how are they looking? They're on-off splits. And Zegras has been equally not good the last 2 years with or without Troy Terry. So that's not it either. I've seen the Ducks fans on social media claim, well, he's playing better defensively. He's working more on that side of the puck. The analytics don't back that up at all. There's nothing to make me think that that's true.
Yeah, right now he's allowing when he's on the ice, 3.6 expected goals against per 60. That is the 7th worst among any forwards with at least 155 on 5 minutes. And granted, 2 of those are other Anaheim Ducks players in Robbie Fabry and Mason McTavish. So the Ducks on the whole have been pretty bad, but he has been exceptionally bad in prior years. I'm not saying he was Selke level, but you could forgive the lack of defense because he was producing near 60-point pace. That has just not been the case right now. And again, he's playing 17 minutes a night. That's probably the most concerning thing. It's not even like he's in Craig Cronin's doghouse right now. He looks like he's beat down. There was a video of him scoring a goal against the Red Wings, and he looked depressed after scoring it. It was genuinely sad to watch. But yeah, I think it's a confidence thing. I think that he had the league put him on the silver platter for everybody after his back-to-back 60-point seasons. He was absolutely electric. And after getting a lot of shit for dragging out his contract, then getting hurt, I think his confidence is just at an all-time low right now. And for a guy that was known for his kind of just flair, playmaking ability, style, that was a lot of that predicated on having the confidence to make those plays. Now that that's gone, and now that other guys like Leo Carlsson and Mason McTavish are kind of elevated ahead of him, I think he's just in a bad spot. And there were reports last year of guys that left the Anaheim Ducks that locker room was kind of a disaster under Craig Cronin. So yeah, I think for Anaheim, they got to move off that guy because nobody is having a good season at Anaheim for the most part this year, and especially Zegras. It's bad.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's probably more a mentality thing than anything. I mean, there's a couple ways maybe you could look at this. Maybe number one is the league put too much pressure on the kid, right? He's being framed as the face of the league potentially, and he's not that quality of player. And
he never was, yeah.
Yeah, the serious hockey fans know that, and maybe on some level he knows that too, and that's just, people are putting too much pressure on him. He can't live up to it. Or it could be the kind of thing where maybe he's just checked out and doesn't care all that much. He got his 8-figure extension. He's dating a D'Amelio sister. He's a big celebrity, without having to be the greatest hockey player in the world. So maybe being the greatest hockey player in the world is just not necessarily on his to-do list, which, if I said that kind of thing about an NBA player or a Premier League soccer player, people would be like, yeah, of course, happens all the time. Hockey
Dating
fans have this tendency to be like, no, not us, not our sport.
We're different.
It never happens in our sport that a guy doesn't actually care that much about hockey and is just happy to show up and get paid and be famous. But who's to say? None of us know the guy personally. None of us know what he's going through. I think it's at least a possibility that he's just not super motivated to, on this team that's not going anywhere
this season, yeah.
On this role that he has locked down no matter how badly he plays, this kind of celebrity lifestyle he gets no matter how badly he plays. Maybe he's just not super motivated to grow his game.
Yeah, I'm not going to go that far against Zegras in terms of being completely disinterested, but Yeah, it's just really unfortunate watching him play right now. I don't think he's going to put up 20 points for the entire season. I think he will find some semblance of an offensive game, but I think long term, if you're the Anaheim Ducks, he has 1 year left after this at $5.75 million. I previously said like don't sell on him now. His value's at an all-time low, but given the coach, given the team, and not really being shit for probably this year and next year as well, I wouldn't hate the idea of moving off him. I think if he got traded, I think that would be a pretty solid wake up call, being like, you're not hot shit anymore. You're going to a market that is more competitive and is going to be on your ass. And he's still making a healthy $5.75 million. So do you think it's realistic that he gets traded in the next 7-8 months? Let's count the offseason as well. And like, I don't even know what the goddamn return would be at this point. It might be like a third round pick. Like it might be like future considerations just to move off that contract.
I don't think it's realistic because it feels like Anaheim would be trading him at an all-time low in value. And as far as like desperation to move off him, there's no incentive. His contract ends soon. You don't need the cap space. Like, if you're really going to get nothing for him, there's no reason you have to trade him instead of just continuing to play him top 6 minutes and hope he figures it out.
I'm thinking if they finish bottom 3 in the NHL and end up getting a top 3 pick, and you have Misa, you have Martone, you have Hagens, who they're not going to be great right off the rip. I think then maybe you trade him if they get like the 6th or 7th overall pick. Maybe there's no incentive to trade him. But yeah, maybe you can convince a team like the Boston Bruins that are talked about a decent amount that have like no offensive play creation right now outside of David Pastrnak to maybe bite on a guy like Trevor Zegras. You might have to retain $1 to $2 million. But again, as we said before, they're not going anywhere. So if that can get you a 2nd or 3rd round pick, maybe you do that. But yeah, I think what's best for Trevor Zegras is to probably move on from Anaheim at this point and kind of have a wake up call in his career.
I mean, it's so tough, right? There's a risk reward with that because there's also a possibility that you move him in,
and he turns
right?
into,
move in this guy who's already, at the very least, we can clearly say, right, he's having confidence issues. That seems to be pretty clear. You move him into a much more competitive market on a team where there's more pressure to perform. That could make that way worse.
You got to nut up. You got to nut up at some point. If he can't handle playing in Boston or something like that, he's just never going to turn it around. You know what I'm saying? Like he needs that wake up call. And I think going to a more competitive team, although that might put the pressure on him, some pressure that he needs, because again, as we just said 9,000 times, they stink. They're going to stink the next few years. They're not going to have expectations probably for another 3 to 4 years or something like that, like actual legit expectations. And I think Zegras knows that, and I think that that's part of the reason why he's not locked in, say, night to night. It seems like every Anaheim Ducks player is like that at this point, and it stinks. Maybe a coaching change. Maybe they fire Craig Cronin, which I think that they might do soon. If Dostal wasn't playing out of his mind, he probably would have been fired by now because he would have been like 4-10-4 at this point. So Dostal saving Cronin's job and maybe halting this team from further progression.
Yeah, I mean, it's Zegras is the focus here, but we could also just as easily talk about, Mason McTavish seems to have dropped off a little bit this year. Gauthier has not been very impressive in his rookie year after there was a lot of ambition for him. Like, he was, putting together good seasons at the minor levels, and hopefully he can take that leap, an NHL player, be productive. He has not been productive.
He's still coming back. But yeah, I think that goes to your point. I'd be really concerned about Zegras if it was like McTavish had 15 points in 18 games. Carlson had 16. Gauthier was killing it, but like everybody is sucking on the Anaheim Ducks. So although I do think that Zegras just seems disengaged and a trade would be best, I still think there is a chance that he turns it around. I don't think that's out of the picture. He's never going to be, I thought he could potentially be a point per game number 1 center. I think that's out of the window. If you're an Anaheim Ducks fan, getting him back to even 55, 60 points would be a massive win at this point.
Yeah, just, treat him as a 2C, hype him as a 2C.
He might be a
pay him like
winger,
a 2C, and I think you won't be that upset with the results.
Yeah, he's a rare case where bridging him was the right call.
Absolutely.
Because at the time, he probably would have commanded like an 8x8, maybe even 8x8.5, considering he had back-to-back 60-point seasons. I got to respect Verbeek on that one for holding it out. I didn't really love that in the moment, but
no, I mean, if he was on a 7x7 right now, it'd be disastrous.
It'd like the entire rebuild would be in jeopardy, maybe to that degree. But thankfully, he's only has 1 year left at 5.75, and he's still a restricted free agent. So say that he never really turns around, you can just sign him to a 4x 4x4, and like you don't need him to even be that productive of a player. You can just have him be a middle sixer, and you're perfectly fine with that.
If he doesn't turn it around real soon, I'm expecting a 1-year contract. I don't think
bet him
anything
up.
longer makes sense.
Just for him to bet on himself. But now we are moving on to the final segment. Kirill Kaprizov is killing it right now. No shit here. My heart pick right now was my runner-up before the season. We're going to be doing a Kirill Kaprizov Would You Rather, and up first, we are going to go with David Pastrnak. What do you think?
It's a tough one. I think Kaprizov has more general upside. I think it's possible that, Pasternak's, we've seen his ceiling, which is not to say that he's like a bad player or a lesser player or anything.
61 goals and 52 assists in a season. That was pretty decent.
Yeah,
that's like I'm picking Pastrnak.
I'm not trying to, these are all great players we're going to talk about
these
here.
are top
so you
15
need to pick
players in the
margins.
entire NHL,
So I guess just what I'm looking at is I feel like Kaprizov is still getting better. I mean, this year is his best year ever so far. He's still improving. I don't know what his ceiling is. It might be even higher than this. Pastrnak, I think we have a pretty good idea of where the ceiling is.
50 to 60-ish goals and assists about.
Yep.
In the season, it's not even close to that. Yeah, it's concerning. I think I'd go with Kaprizov as well. I think it is decently close, but I think the Kaprizov's playmaking ability is a little bit better.
It is. He makes everyone else better around him, whereas Pastrnak is very much like a prototypical sniper.
Get him the puck, he'll score, but outside of that, there's not a ton. And especially sometimes he makes just dumb turnovers and stuff like that in the playoffs as well. Next up, we got Leon Draisaitl.
Kaprizov here by a mile. So the most amazing stat that I was looking into for researching this one right here. Kirill Kaprizov's played 4 NHL seasons, right? In all 4 of those seasons, he's had more even strength goals than Draisaitl. There has never been a year where Draisaitl had more even strength goals than Kaprizov. So, if I need someone to score power play goals in November, give me Draisaitl all day. If I'm trying to actually win hockey games, Kaprizov is better at basically everything except power play scoring, right? He generates his own offense more. He's a better playmaker. He's a better, all around cover the whole ice player than Draisaitl is. You certainly can't accuse Kaprizov of benefiting from having the greatest player in the world setting him up sometimes. Kaprizov is out carrying his team night in, night out.
I'm still going with Draisaitl. I am still going with Draisaitl. You mentioned November goals, but Kirill Kaprizov in his career, well, in 2023 he had 1 goal in 6 games. I'm not trying to discredit him as a bad player, but in total he only has 12 points in 19 playoff games. It's a little bit concerning. Outside of the 2022 run, he's kind of crapped the bed throughout. But more so, I'm just talking about Draisaitl. I think his overall track record, I think he's a better passer than Kaprizov. And yeah, McDavid sets him up on the power play, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the 5-on-5, not saying Kaprizov has great line mates, but like Draisaitl has to play with utter crap there. So in terms of the even strength goals, it does make a little bit of sense. I just think when Draisaitl in the playoffs, at times, it's not like McDavid's carrying him. At times he straight up outperformed McDavid. He outperformed him probably in the 2023 playoffs, as well as the first 2 rounds in 2024. And Draisaitl eventually had to deal with, I think he broke his rib and had like some type of wrist injury. And I know that everybody in the playoffs gets hurt to some degree, but you saw such a stark fall off. In the first 2 rounds, he was hands down the Conn Smythe pick from the Edmonton Oilers. So yeah, I think I would still go with Leon Draisaitl, who has consistently been posting 110-point pace kind of seasons. And even this year when McDavid went down, he still had like 7 or 8 points in 3 games. He was exceptional as well. So I'm still going with Leon Draisaitl.
Agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah, you've always been a Draisaitl hater. Definitely Kaprizov defensively has the edge, but I'm going with Draisaitl given his playoff and regular season track record. Nikita Kucherov.
This is tough. Are we saying like now or like in the near future?
This season, yeah.
Okay, right now I think Kaprizov, who is a very similar type player to Kucherov at this point in their careers, Kaprizov's just, his body's holding up a little bit better. He's a better scorer right now than Kucherov. I don't think Kaprizov will ever hit the heights of like the
Kucherov last year.
2020-ish
Yeah.
Kucherov.
Kucherov in the playoffs, yeah.
Or even like, that MVP had the 120 point some season.
He did have 144 last year, but
he did. But I don't know. Like everyone had points. It seems less impressive when everyone.
Yeah, the
had
128.
He
was in a league of his own that season.
Yeah. So I don't think Kaprizov will ever be the kind of player to win the MVP, scoring like 15 more points than the next runner up. I don't think that's within his reach. But I think that this version of Kucherov's obviously still a very good player, just like slightly worse at most parts of hockey than Kaprizov.
Yeah, I'm really close on this. I'm really fucking close on this. I think I might go Kaprizov just because Kucherov does not give less of a shit defensively, and I don't see that changing in the near future. I think Kaprizov's the better goal scorer. I think he's better defensively. Again, we're talking about probably like the 6th or 7th best player in the entire NHL. But I think I would, and not to discredit Kucherov, but he does play with like Braden Point and a loaded power play versus Kaprizov's playing with like Matt Zuccarello and Ryan Hartman. I think I'd go with Kaprizov. I put him number 7 back in like the 2022 season. I was ahead of the curve. I've knocked him down in previous years, but Kaprizov's the top 7 guy in the NHL right now. I don't think that's that controversial. Mikko Rantanen.
I feel bad because it's going to sound to the audience like I'm just riding Kaprizov all the way, but like this has to be Kaprizov, right? We haven't really seen Rantanen be like a top 10 caliber player.
He has been very good outside of McKinnon. No, actually,
he's been good
in his games outside of McKinnon. I will respect him on that. I think that he is like 1.3 points per game away from McKinnon. I don't know the stats on my on hand, but he has been good. But I get what you're saying. He's not, when McKinnon is playing, you don't think Rantanen's better.
No, I mean, it's, Rantanen's, I do think Rantanen is like underrated in this scheme
he's
of
top
things.
15,
I do think it's this
sniffing
weird
top 10.
side effect where like, I think a lot of fans underrate him because he spends so much time on McKinnon's wing and
Definitely.
No one loves.
He's not the most underrated player in the entire NHL. I see some people saying that. That's the dumbest take of all time.
No, because he's like great people rate him.
People some people have him 15th or 16th instead of like 11th or 12th. People are like, he's criminally underrated. I just need to get that off my chest. Because if I see like legit stars get called the most underrated player in the league, shut the fuck up.
No, you're fair on that, but I think some people just don't love putting 2 line mates in their top 15
10,
players. But like, Rantanen is that. I just don't think he's quite as good as Kaprizov.
I'd agree. I think Kaprizov's the better playmaker and arguably the better goal scorer. In the playoffs, I could definitely see an argument for Mikko Rantanen, considering he's a 6'4" absolute terror out there. But in terms of, if I needed someone to play with Nathan McKinnon, I would maybe go Mikko Rantanen, if that makes sense. But if I needed somebody to carry my entire offense, I'd go with Kaprizov. And that's what I'm more so looking at as my franchise player. I think I would lean with Kaprizov.
I just want to follow up there too, because Kaprizov is like a reasonably physical guy.
I'm just saying 6'4", 220.
He's not the biggest guy, but there's definitely
he's not.
The usual stereotype is like a lot of these Russian wingers tend to be lazy and soft and not super physical. Kaprizov is more physical than most of those types of guys.
And he plays some defense. He's not afraid to back check. But lastly, we're going to go with Alexander Barkov, who's off to a fiery offensive start. Obviously won the Stanley Cup last year and is a Selke winner.
Yeah, it's at this point I'll say Barkov, and it's funny because like the first, however many years of his career, I was thinking honestly Barkov is a little bit overrated, I feel.
He was so people same thing. It's like he was the most underrated player from 2017 to 2022.
Literally, right? Like the most underrated player in the player survey for literally
he's fucking
5
top
years
3 in the
row.
entire NHL, yeah.
Like you guys voted him most underrated 3 years in a row. How can you still call him underrated? But they did. And then it's like, I don't know if Barkov's really like a top 10 player. He's not like carrying an offense like that. And then the last year and a half has really converted me with how incredible he's been
defensively
with the whole game. He's always been good defensively, but he's, he can carry an offense for sure. He doesn't have to night in, night out. Florida has talent around him. But like just the, his overall ability now, he makes everyone around him better, which
Sam
that's,
Reinhart,
I think,
57
the clear
goal
thing
scorer,
to me, right? Once you bring in this talent next to Barkov, you say like, wow, he makes these guys better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would go with Barkov. I feel like I'm disrespecting Kucherov still for picking Kaprizov over him, but I'm going with Barkov. I think that he is absolutely balling offensively. I agree. After 2023, you thought maybe Tkachuk is the total offensive catalyst of this team, and Barkov's more of like a secondary guy. But this season, he's playing amazing offensively. Last year, also very productive offensively, and in the playoffs has shown up. And yeah, the defensive difference, I think, in this scenario versus Kaprizov is bigger than the potential offensive difference of Kaprizov having 120 points. Barkov's looking like, at least pace-wise, he did miss some games to start the season. He might be sniffing a 105-point pace this year. He's been fantastic. He's the most, I hate to use the cliche, might be the most complete in terms of like every single attribute. Who's the highest? He maybe doesn't have the high highs of some other players. But yeah, he's awesome. He's a top 8 player in the NHL. Arguably, if he continues this pace, he might have top 5 arguments if he goes for 102 points in 75 games this year.
I'd probably put him up there. Yeah. I think not necessarily on the quality, but on like the style of game, how it feels when you watch him.
Yeah,
Barkov now is the most similar player to me to like Sidney Crosby
when
he was young. Just the overall, like he does everything. He makes everyone around him better.
The
like,
IQ is
you
off
watch
the
this guy and you believe like he probably could score 50 goals if he chose
he
to
let
be
Sam Reinhart
like
he let Sam Reinhart score 57 goals.
That's not his style of game.
Yeah, the Sam Reinhart thing is not Sam Reinhart obviously is an amazing player in his own right, but yeah, Sam Reinhart having 57 goals last year.
We've
Barkov
seen Sam Reinhart with
amount.
like normal centers, and we know what his normal level is.
Yeah, he's awesome, but yeah, Barkov is just the prototypical championship style of player that you kind of cook up in a lab. But yeah, I went with Kaprizov on what? Kucherov, Rantanen, and Pasta. You went with Kaprizov on every single one besides Barkov?
Everyone but Barkov.
So you probably have him as what, like 5th or 6th best? You have Matthews, I assume, ahead. I'll start with Matthews. Matthews, McKinnon, McDavid. So you have Barkov like 4th, basically. I assume you don't have Makar.
No, I'd put probably Barkov. 4th. I'm just thinking forwards, but like Barkov 4th, Kaprizov 5th feels like.
But do you have like Quinn Hughes or Makar ahead of them?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Quinn, yeah. If they, yeah, I think, damn, I'm trying to make my top 50. Yeah. It'd probably be McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews, Draisaitl. I know you're going to hate that. Barkov, Kaprizov. Yeah, shit. I'm going to have Barkov number 5 or number 6. Yeah, I think if he's this good offensively this season, he rightfully so deserves it. But yeah.
And it's also, I just want to hammer in too, real quick, how like consistent Barkov is at just like not falling into cold spells, because Matt Tkachuk consistent. I mean, his Matt Tkachuk's numbers end up great every
last
year.
Last year he finished like 17 points. He had like 17 points in his first like 30 games last year. I mean, disasters.
Matt Tkachuk every year seems to have like entire month-long stretches where you're like, he's not producing like I think Matt Tkachuk should produce. Mm-hmm. Like if I draft Matt Tkachuk in fantasy and he puts together this month, I'm extremely disappointed. Mm-hmm. Barkov is like the steady rock on Florida. He's constant throughout the year. He doesn't get in those cold streaks.
He's not going to have
Tkachuk
the highs of a Kirill Kaprizov scoring like 9 points in a week, but he's not going to have the lows given his overall two-way style of play. But yeah, that's the episode. Thanks for joining us on this one. Let us know in the comments, what do you think? We'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace.